So, I am the proud owner of a chest freezer business and the proud owner of a chest freezer that I don't really know what to do with. So, who do I ring? My brother, the chef. And you're going to show me today how I can make a cottage pie that I can freeze and put away and then reheat for tea through the week.
Yeah, that's it. Cottage pie, shepherd's pie, there are slight differences. Shepherd's pie is lamb, cottage pie is beef, so we've got some beef here today, minced beef. We've also got some vegetables, carrot, celery, onion, and a few other bits and pieces to help flavour the cottage pie. Right, so what we're going to do, we've got about 1 kilo of mince here. We'll season it up with some salt and pepper. That's going to help bring the moisture out of the meat and help brown it up and also flavour it. And then we'll cook it in about 2 or 3 batches. Too much.
So we're not going to put it all in and...
If you put it all in, basically you've got it in this pan, it's just going to start sweating and it's not going to take on too much colour. So by doing it in batches, you'll get some flavour much quicker. So high heat for this, a little bit of oil. So if you just get some salt and pepper onto that, be generous.
Generous?
Yeah, it's going to flavour it. An important thing to remember about this is if you are going to do this, don't season the meat too far in advance. We're going to put this straight in. The pan should be nice and hot now, so we should be okay just to go straight in. But season it too far in advance, the salt draws the moisture out and we want that to sort of stay in as the flavour. Right, we've got about 1/3 of it there. We're just going to put this straight in. It should sizzle. And then what we'll do is just press this down and space it out. So I'm just pressing it all around the pan. There's a few gaps in between the mincemeat. That's important, so that what you'll find is as the mincemeat starts to cook, it will release some of the liquid that's in there. And that wants to evaporate away so that we actually get some good colour on this. Again, the tempting thing to do with this pan is to start stirring it. Just let it start to brown. A most common thing that happens when you brown something in a pan is that you're worried that it's going to stick to the pan.
Yeah.
Don't worry. If it sticks to the pan, we get some nice flavour, some sediment at the bottom. That's going to be really good flavour for our pie. Once we've got some colour on there, just give it a quick stir around. What's important to remember for this as well is that we're not trying to cook the mincemeat at this point. This is going to be cooked for about an hour or so after we've browned it and assembled it. So we're just trying to get some good colour on this. So don't worry if there's little bits of pink meat in there. This will all cook later.
Okay.
So I'm just going to flip this all over so that we can get the other bits coloured. Okay, so I'm happy that this meat's now browned. There's some nice bits of brownness on that pan as well that I'm very happy with. We'll just get a bowl and we're going to move this into the bowl.
So I've got a dirty pan now, Philip.
You have got a dirty pan, but this is great. What we want now is we want to deglaze. Deglazing is basically getting a little bit of liquid in there. That's going to bring all of this sediment off the pan and that's going to add extra flavour to the pie. So a good amount of water in. It should start coming to the boil pretty quickly if the pan's hot. And then just stir that around. So some people might think that this isn't looking very nice. You're just scraping the pan with bits of meat, but this is actually really good flavour.
So we don't want to lose that then, that wants to go in, yeah?
Definitely wants to go in. In a way, it's a really sort of crude form of stock making. You've got some flavour in there, you're adding liquid to it, you've got a really good flavour. What it also does is clean the pan, so you're ready then just to add the next bit of oil and then the next bit of meat. And then you can pour it into a separate bowl, but this is all going in together.
So just put that in where the mince is, yeah?
So next batch. Right, so this is the last batch done. We'll just get this off into the bowl. And there we have the meat done. Now for the veg. Okay, so for the veg, what we need, we've got an onion, celery, carrot.
It's not a lot of veg, is it?
It's not, but it's just, once it's cut down, it will just go through that mincemeat just to give a little bit of extra flavour. So the way to cut this, we want to cut it nice and fine. First of all, let's peel the carrot.
Right. I think I managed to peel a carrot.
So what we want to do with this, the easiest way to get this cut is to get it into a square shape. So what we want to do is just block it off. So we're just going to cut the first bit, get that onto a nice flat area, and then just slice little bits of carrot off so that we're getting what we call a blocked off carrot. And this is then going to be just cut. Now, from a time point of view, if you cut along the length all the time, you can then bring these together and then you'll be able to get a good dice. Get them all against each other and then just use your knife to cut these nice dice. And like I say, if you wanted to just slice your carrot instead of blocking off, it works. You know, it depends what you're trying to get, but this just makes it look a little bit nicer. So we've got our carrot diced, that's ready to be browned. For the celery, obviously it's a different shape, and the best way to get this, we're not going to get too many square shapes from it, but we'll just top and tail it. Nothing wrong with these bits, they can be used again for stocks, but then the best way I find to cut this is just to cut it in half along the length, cut it in half again, and you're looking for something to be about the same size as the carrots that you've chopped, and then just slicing. So that's the celery diced, and then finally what we need to do is just get the onion. Now the onion wants to be finely sliced, or sorry, the onion wants to be finely diced, so we'll cut it in half.
We're going to put the whole onion in, Philip.
It looks quite a lot, so maybe even half an onion, but there's nothing wrong with putting it all in. You can always blanch and refresh the onion.
Now you've left the ends on there, I would have probably cut those off.
What this does, it just makes it much easier to chop. So we've got our onion cut in half, you can see it's cut through the root.
Yeah. Do you always cut through the root?
I do. What it does, it keeps everything intact. If you're trying to chop an onion, you don't want to be chasing it around on a board. So we've got these dry layers of skin, we've removed those. Top tip, this is your onion ready to chop, but if you take just this extra layer off, this is the sort of semi-dry layer, and this is the one that you just have trouble chopping. So if you take that off, then you've got a fresh, easier to chop onion underneath.
Right.
So just take that one off and it's just so much easier to chop. The root we don't want, but I don't want to chop the root off completely because this is holding our onion in place. So we'll just chop that off, chop the top off, and then we want to dice this. So looking at the veg, we want it about the same sort of size. Again, it's a round shape, so we're not going to get perfectly diced onion, but I've got the root end away from me. I'm just going to cut down through the onion.
But not all the way to that end?
No, so the root is holding it in place.
But it's obviously it's going all the way to this end.
All the way down. Once we get over a bit, we'll just use our hands to keep it steady, cutting all the way down. Tricky bit. Just use your fingers, get it on top, just get your knife to go horizontally. That's just going to make it just that little bit extra fine. And then what you want to do is hold your small finger and thumb together and then just
try and make that claw shape again as much as you can.
It's always best just to keep fingertips out the way. Make sure your thumb is out the way at this point as well. And then you've got your diced onion. Again, this starts getting a little bit wobbly. You can always put it down, but rather than worry about a small bit of onion, we can just move that to one side. Definitely. So what we've got is our onion, celery and carrot ready to go in. Now you could put this straight in with the mincemeat and it's going to cook for about an hour, so it will definitely cook quite well, but we can get extra flavour from this. So we can get our pan. It's still got a little bit of mincemeat in. You can clean it off if you want to. It's all going in the same dish, so I'm happy that we'll get this in. And just like the meat, we don't want to overcrowd the pan, so I suggest we do the carrot and celery first, and then we'll do the onion a little bit later.
Okay.
And all we're doing again is just trying to get some colour on this. So a little bit of oil. Get that nice and hot. We don't need to season this. That's not going to help brown the veg too much. We just want to get some nice hot oil, and then this can go in. So once it's hot, In it goes. We'll spread those out. Again, a smaller amount in the pan, you're just going to brown it much quicker.
So they look like they're browning now.
So you can see some nice colour on that as well. We'll give them just a few more seconds just to get a bit more colour, and then we're going to put them into a bowl just out of the way while we do the onions. You could put everything in together. If you've got a big enough pan, it would work. What we find with the onions is that they just soften a little bit quicker, so it's best to do them just a little bit on their own. Now, a slotted spoon works well with this. I've got my pan angled so that I'm just taking the veg out, and we've still got a little bit of oil in there, and that's enough
to do
for
the
the
onions.
So we'll just get those in.
So we don't need to mess about cleaning the pan or anything this time.
You can. There's not going to be too much colour from the vegetables, unlike the minced meat. So just getting some nice caramelisation from this as well will give you a better flavour. So there's a nice colour starting to appear on the onions. What we can do now is get the vegetables back into this pan, because we've got the colour. We'll get everything in, and we're going to add a little bit of tomato puree, if you've got some over there. Just a little squeeze of it. We don't need too much. And just be aware, tomatoes again quite high in natural sugar, so when it goes in concentrated tomato puree, it can scorch a little bit, so just be aware of that. But we just squeeze a small amount in. What we're going to do...
Well, that really is a small amount, actually.
It's just going to give you a...
I probably would have put half a tube in, left to my own devices.
Do you know, you could. It would still work. Now, as this is cooking out, if you just grab me a couple of teaspoons of flour, we'll just get this in here. And again, I want to be aware, this is a dry pan. If we've got too much heat, then things can start to burn. Just a teaspoon, yeah.
A heaped or a...
It's just a small, that's perfect. Put that in, sprinkle it about. What this is going to do, it's just going to help thicken up the sauce as we are. And all we're doing is just cooking this flour out a little bit. This is then when the liquid's going to be added to it, it's going to give you just a little bit more.
Are we doing the flour?
Yeah. It's just going to give you a little bit more texture. Right, that can come out. And we're ready now just to assemble. So we'll use this pan. It's a nice tall pan, hasn't got much of a wide surface area, so we're not worried about it reducing too much and possibly catching at the bottom. And then basically all we need to do is get our mincemeat into the pan.
That's with all the juices.
All the juices are in there.
The pan, yeah.
And then just stir our veg through. And again, that's with any deglaçage, as we call it, the juices from cooking those. Give it a good mix. And then we're just going to bring this to the boil. Now we've got some stock to add to this. We've already got some juices in. The deglaçage is already in the pan. But we just want to top this up with a little bit of stock. Now we're using beef, so beef stock makes sense, but you could use chicken stock, even a vegetable stock, anything that's just going to add some extra flavour. And you can see that with the deglaçage, all of the sediment and the water that we put in after browning, we're nearly halfway full anyway. So we'll just add it. We want to cover it so that it's and we can always just top it up if it seems to, and then we've got just some Worcester sauce, which is going to add a nice bit of flavour. Not too much, just a few drops to help in, and then some bay leaves in there. And that's basically all we're doing. We're going to bring it up to the boil, and then it's just going to simmer away for about an hour. What we're trying to do, the meat is almost cooked. It's just going to take a few minutes for it to be fully cooked. But what will happen if it cooks a little bit longer is it'll break down and become very nice and tender. So that's what we want to try and get from this now. So that's nice and underway. We can just put that to one side actually, and we'll just keep that with a lid on a gentle simmer. So for the potatoes, what we've got is a pan about half full with some cold water. Salt in the water is quite important, Potatoes really take a lot of salt. I'd be tempted to get a good handful of salt and put it in.
Okay.
Obviously, thinking about health, if you don't want too much salt in your diet, then you just leave a little bit out or don't put any at all. But it really does make an important flavour contribution to the mashed potato that we're making. So you peel some potatoes, if you just get them onto the board, and let's cut them into uniform sizes.
So, and these are Maris Pipers, does it matter?
It does. If you've got a waxy potato, then when you try and mash that, it's not going to break down very well. If you've got what we call a floury potato, then what will happen is it will cook and it will break down much easier. Right, chop that in about quarters. Let's chop it in half and then in half again.
Half. I'm completely not holding my fingers in a claw.
That's fine. And then just always make sure you've got a flat edge on the board where possible. It just prevents it from sliding around.
You are tempted to do that, aren't you? To hold it. So that size?
Yeah, and then what we want is every potato to be roughly this sort of size.
Okay.
Right, they're in the pan. So we've got this in cold salted water. We'll bring it up to the boil.
And putting it in the cold water means that they're going to cook more evenly. We're
Yes.
not going to start cooking the outsides.
So what it means is that the outer edges will still be intact when hopefully the centre of it's cooked.
Okay. And about 20 minutes?
About that, yeah. Okay, so it looks as though these potatoes are about ready. We'll get this strained into a colander. So the steam coming off this, they're off the heat. They're in the pan, which has got a little bit of residual heat. So once these have steamed dry, what we'll do, we'll get them through a sieve. You can use a potato ricer, a masher if you want, but the sieve gets the ultimate mashed potato.
Okay.
So we've got our container, we've got a sieve. This seems as though it's going to be a pointless exercise. Why would you worry about putting mashed potato through a sieve? But if they're cooked well, it doesn't take that long. That one's through in less than 10 seconds. And the key to doing this is doing a few at a time. You put all of the potatoes in, you're trying to push them around. But if you just put one in or two in at a time, they break down really easily and they go through no problem. So again, it's a little bit time consuming to do this, but it's the difference between a nice mashed potato and the perfect mashed potato.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the potato mashed. We'll get a little bit of butter. Now, there are specific amounts in recipes, but basically, as much as you feel you need. It's a really nice flavour. The more butter in, the richer it's going to be. The more butter in, the unhealthy it's going to be.
And that's, I got unsalted butter, Philip, is that?
I would use salted. Unsalted's fine, but like we said before, the salt really makes the potato flavour. But then, if you use an unsalted, you can actually you've got control.
Salt in as well, yeah.
What we're going to do is just get this just to melt the butter and the milk in.
Really?
Once it's hot, it just incorporates into the mashed potato much easier. And a good bit of advice for this is use less. You can always add more later.
Right.
But if you put too much in at the start, you get a really loose mashed potato. So once that's all in and melted, just give that a stir. So just tasting this, we want to get the flavour of the mashed potato. This is where you can add your salt and pepper. And we definitely need some salt and pepper in there just to give it some flavour.
I'll put some white pepper there.
Just put a little bit of that in. And with seasoning, again, it's just important to remember you can always add, but you can't take away. You put too much in and it's in there, but you can always just keep adding. Okay, so mash we've got made. This should now have simmered. And if we have a look at it, not much is happening, and you can see there's quite a bit of liquid there.
Yeah.
So we serve that, it's going to be very sloppy. So what we want to do now is just reduce it down. So if you can just hold this, I'm just going to pour and then tip that
back in the pan. Want as much of the liquid out as possible.
Yeah, there'll always be a little bit more liquid in the bottom with the mincemeat and veg, but as long as we've got most of it out, we can start reducing this down. So that's simply taking it right on.
So you've gone for a really wide, shallow pan
and
this
that's
time.
important as well. The surface area is larger, so it's going to reduce a lot quicker as well. What happens when it evaporates is the water comes out, but the flavour stays in.
Okay.
And you don't really need to do anything to that. Depending on how much liquid you've got will depend on how long this will take. What we're looking for is a syrupy consistency. Okay, so this looks as though it's reduced down. Now, a good test for this, you drag the spoon up and you almost see that what we call a parting of the waves.
Yeah.
See how it's staying a while before it starts going in? That is the right consistency. We'll mix that in to the mincemeat. And remember, there was a little bit of residual liquid left in that mincemeat, so we've taken it that little bit further. We can dispose of the bay leaves, they've served the purpose. Now the important thing with this is, if you're going to freeze this, get the mashed potato to cool down, get the meat to cool down before you assemble it. Otherwise, you're talking about things at a warm environment, and that's when you've got problems with bacteria. So get it to cool down just a little bit. Okay, so this is all cool now, so it's really good for us to freeze. What I've got are some tinfoil containers, perfect for freezing. What it means is that you can put these into the freezer and then get them out, and there's no more hassle. Right, so portion control, fairly important. You don't want to get too much of the filling and not enough mash, or too much of the mash and not enough filling. So try and push it down into the corners. So that's probably about enough. With this kilo, you'll probably get about 2 or 3 of these tin foils. And what we would do at home is put one into a casserole dish or something that goes straight into the oven, and then just the leftover mince would cool down and put into a tin foil. So we've got the mash. So it's in the centre. What we want to do is just gently push it down towards the edges.
We're just teasing it really, aren't we?
And we want to get these nice little edges on it, because later on, and this is optional, we're going to put some cheese on, and that will fall into these little facets and just give you a nice texture on the finished mash. Okay, so this is basically your cottage pie. If you wanted to, what we should do probably is just add a little bit of cheese and breadcrumbs on this.
Right.
We've got some bread, and I think a lot of people, with the offers that are on in supermarkets, they'll buy 2 or 3 loaves, freeze one. Bread freezes really well, and a good bit of advice with freezing bread is, if you know that you're just going to use 3 or 4 slices a day, freeze them in batches so that you can take them out, and then you're not having to take a whole loaf.
Rather than having to hack 2 slices off.
So we've got the bread, just break it up. The blades are going to do all of the work. Get that on, and then just that looks about fine enough. And all we want are just a few crumbs. Just be careful of those blades, because they do get in the way. But we've got some breadcrumbs that we are going to put into a bowl. We can freeze. I think that might be enough for these 2 pies. We can freeze the rest. But what we're going to do with this is the breadcrumbs are going to be mixed with the cheese. What happens?
So does it matter what cheese? we've got a mature cheddar there because that's the one that I like.
I love cheese, and the mature cheddar is probably my favourite. So a nice, strong flavoured cheddar will work really well with this. Because what we're going to do is put it on top of the cottage pie. Now, you could just put cheese on, okay, and that will do. That will melt in when you cook it. It will give you a nice finish. But when you add the breadcrumbs, and if we just put and mix this in, what the breadcrumbs do is they absorb any of the melting fat from this, so you get a really nice brown colour when it's actually cooked. I would say maybe ratio-wise, you want about half breadcrumbs, half cheese. That should be about right. And again, just bear in mind that you're going to press this down with a lid. So you don't want too much.
So we're going to freeze one of these like this as it is without cooking it anymore, and then we're going to cook one, aren't we? We're going to bake one. So do I bake it, can I bake it from frozen, or am I going to...
I would defrost it. It can be baked from frozen, and if you're going to bake it from frozen, have it on a lower heat. So this is all fitting nicely. We know that the cheese and the breadcrumbs are under. We can just get that on. Obviously we need to label it and put a date on it. And I would say that will last for a good 6 months.
So cottage pie.
So cottage pie, used by, and then 6 months from now.
Okay.
And then what we can do with this one, we've got this oven on at 200. Let's get this one straight in.